How's it going, folks? Patty B here, and we're going to talk about the range of motion of the hip again and the muscle and movements associated with the hip. So today, and like I posted yesterday, I talked about the range of motion available and the degrees and the movement. Today we're going to add on to that, and we're going to talk about muscles and the examples with it. All right, so we got flexion, and as we talk, we got 180 degrees and with our knee bent. So basically that's me bringing my knee as high as I can in that position. That's a hip flexion at 180 degrees. If I would be laying on my back or just in that right position, my knee straight, I only have 90 degree or less, depending on the tightness of the muscles affected by that range of motion, okay? Or could be associated with the hamstring causing tightness, but I don't want to go too much in detail with that. Let's just stay with the ranges of motion here. Okay, we got 180 with our knee bent, and if I extend my leg, I got 90 degree of range of motion. Some muscles that are available, that are performing that range of motion and that action are the psoas major, minor, iliacus, rectus femoris, iliopsoas, sartorius. They're all involved in that motion. Some examples of hip flexion, we got, let's say you're warming up, high knees would be a hip flexion. We got squatting, that's also a hip flexion. And the classic sitting is a hip flexion also. So those are different movements we could pay attention at, and we could be more aware of what our hip does and muscle affected while we do those movements. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about, it's extension of the hip. We got 10-20 degrees, and that's, remember, it's when our feet, just a small little cue here to understand, it's when our femur bone of our thigh is behind us. Okay, and so that means the muscles that are performing that action are the glute max, glute med is associated with that, and we got the hamstring muscle group also. And some example, we got walking, we got running, anytime our femur is behind. And for y'all weightlifters out there, when we perform our triple extension here, that is also an extension of the hip. Okay, now if we go down, and we're gonna go talk about abduction and adduction. So before we talk about, when we talk about abduction, it's when we move away from our midline. Okay, so it's like that emoji we got on our phone that is available, that little dance. So it's like emoji again. We got 45 degrees, and very important, we don't compensate on the other side to load and get more range of motion. Here it's just stable hips, 45 degrees. Okay, now adduction, there's some, it's either from that 45 degree back to the midline, or we could take it and that's the other 10 degree when we load our left leg and then we bring our right leg over where we got only 10 degrees. Now let's talk about those muscles that are antagonists to each other, so that are performing those actions and are going to be contract each other. So for the ABD adduction, so we got the glute med, glute min, obturator internus, sartorius, TFL, gemellus inferior and superior, where they're going to bring the leg out. So if you think kicking a ball, we're abducting our hip. Okay, so kicking a ball or getting ready to kick a ball would be that action of abduction. And then when we think of adduction, when we do perform the action of kicking a ball, we got the muscle of the adductors muscle group, gracilis pectineus. Adductor muscle group, we got adductor brevis, longus, and magnus also, and that's the last action of, like, the real action of kicking the ball. We also adductor versus abduction, and adduction could be, think of like skating. When we are skating, could be one of them also. Now let's move to internal and external rotation of the hip, which is really, really important while we perform any squatting motion or just walking in general, as it's our position of our femur going in or out. So internal rotation, when we bring the hip or contract the muscles of the hip to a bigger level. So it's in, and external would be opening our hip up. Okay, so internal rotation, like we said before, we got 40 to 45 degree, and external rotation we got only 45 degree. The muscles of internal rotation are adductor brevis, longus magnus, glute med and mid, TFL, and then two of the hamstring muscles, semitendinosus and semimembranosus. One action of you could think of the internal rotation, if you have a really good internal rotation, it means that you're able to squat with your toes relatively forward. Okay, so that's one way to think about it. The other one, if you do the pigeon stretch would be external rotation, or if you're able to sit like that, that would be external rotation. And if you're able to bring your knee or sit in that other position, that's internal rotation of the hip. Now let's go to that pigeon stretch external rotation movement. So that's when our knee is out. So basically bring our leg in, so our leg, thigh, and that's bring in that position, that figure 4 position. So muscles of there, we got a good mnemonic to remember. People get on and off the bus quickly. So we got superior piriformis, that famous piriformis muscle. We got superior gemellus, in internal obturator, inferior gemellus, external obturator, and quadratus femoris. So external rotation, it's mean think about squatting with your toes out. So more your toes are out, more external rotation of the hip you got. Cool?
What about like a sumo deadlift?
And also sumo deadlift, great call, Miss Camera woman, I should say. So if you have really good external hip rotation, that means you could be probably more proficient with your sumo deadlift position, but that's more related to a leverage context. So on this note, remember the movement of your hip that can do, the range of motion available, muscles, and think of examples, okay? So sitting, running, walking, kicking a ball, sprinting, skating, all those things are part of our anatomy. It's going to be very important we understand that as we move forward. So on this note, stand up, walk around, free those hips, and remember, like Shakira said, hips don't lie.